The night was silent across the abandoned colony, and the air carried only the sound of dust storms that moved through broken metal frames and shattered glass. The human explorer named Daniel walked slowly with a dim light in his hand, searching for anything useful. He had been living alone for many weeks after the mining crew had fled from this dangerous sector, but he refused to leave. He wanted to find something that could give him purpose, or maybe enough resources to change his life. Forever he kept walking through the ruins, and then he heard something unusual. A sound that was not wind, not machine, not his own footsteps. It was soft like a whisper, and it froze him in place. Turned the light, and the beam landed on a small figure, hiding behind broken walls. It was not human. It was not a soldier in armor. It was something delicate, something alive with wide eyes, glowing faintly in the dark. She looked like a girl, but not from Earth. Her skin carried a faint shimmer, and her hair floated lightly, as if some hidden energy surrounded her. Daniel stood shocked, his heart racing, because he had only heard rumors that alien beings sometimes moved through abandoned colonies, but never once had he seen one this close. She tried to step back, but her foot hit the broken metal, and she almost fell. Daniel instinctively moved forward and caught her wrist. He was stronger than her. She did not resist much, her breathing fast, her eyes staring at him with fear and confusion. Daniel tightened his grip and spoke slowly. "Who are you?" But she did not reply. Instead, she whispered in a strange tone words that made no sense, but the sound felt heavy, like a secret carried in her voice. Daniel thought quickly. If the rumors were true, some alien races were hostile and dangerous, but this one looked too fragile. She seemed lost, scared, maybe even hunted. He knew he should treat her like a valuable capture, maybe even trade her for resources if he ever found another crew, but something inside him whispered that this meeting was more important than simple survival. He guided her back to the small shelter he had built in the corner of the colony. She followed quietly, not fighting, but her eyes kept watching everything around her, as if she expected someone to arrive at any moment. Daniel gave her water. She hesitated, but then accepted it. Her hands trembling, she looked at him again, and tried to speak again. The words unclear, but slowly she pointed at herself and said one simple sound like a name, Lyra. Daniel understood this was how she wanted to be called. As the hours passed, Lyra started to copy his words, repeating them slowly. Her learning speed shocked him. She could form basic words within minutes, her voice soft, almost musical. She called in Daniel, and when she said his name it felt strange, like his heart was no longer only his own. He realized she was intelligent, very intelligent, and this was no ordinary meeting. It was something that could change everything he believed about humans and aliens. Later that night, as Daniel worked on repairing his radio, Lyra suddenly grabbed his arm, her face pale, her voice urgent. She whispered again in her broken English, they come. Daniel froze and asked, "Who?" "Comies," but she could only shake her head and point upward to the sky. He ran outside and looked at the stars. There was nothing visible, but he trusted her warning. Something about the fear in her eyes made him believe her completely. The colony was silent again, but now Daniel felt danger pressing around them. He asked her why they would come for her, but she only lowered her head and tears formed in her glowing eyes. She whispered, "Run, no time, run." But Daniel did not move. He knew he had captured her, and maybe now the act of holding her could bring death to him. But he also knew that letting her go could mean losing the most important discovery of his life. As the dust storm grew outside, Daniel sat beside Lyra in the shelter, the silence heavy but the tension unbreakable. He realized she was not a normal alien. She was special, and if others were hunting her, then he was now caught in a storm much bigger than he had ever imagined. The sound of static from his radio suddenly broke. The night signals from faraway voices speaking in a coded language, and Daniel understood the hunt had already begun. Alien girl watched him closely, her eyes filled with both fear and trust, and Daniel felt a strange promise form in his heart. He had captured her, yes, but now he also felt captured by her presence. He could not explain why, but he knew his life would never be the same. The dust-filled air moved slowly through the broken doors of the shelter, and Daniel sat in silence watching. The strange girl who now sat only a few feet away, her eyes glowing faintly as if carrying light from another world, and he could not understand why she had come here or what danger followed her. But her fear was clear, and it was enough to make his chest heavy with thoughts he had never felt before. He wanted to ask many questions, but he knew she could only speak a few human words. Still he tried, slowly saying small words: water, food, safe, and pointing to objects so she could learn and repeat. And she did. She repeated with her soft voice, like a child learning for the first time, and every time she said a word, her eyes looked at him with hope, as if he was the only person she could trust. The night moved on, but Daniel could not sleep because every time he closed his eyes he heard her broken words from earlier. They come, and he felt that something was moving closer in the dark sky, something he could not see yet, but he could feel it pressing like a storm before lightning. He checked his radio again, and faint signals crackled through the silent, signals that did not belong to humans. He walked outside with his light, and the wind struck his face while the colony lay empty like a ghost town. The metal frames of old machines rattled in the storm, and Daniel felt the heavy truth that he was not alone anymore, not only because of Lyra, but also because others were watching, searching, closing in. And his time to decide what to do was running out. When he returned inside, he saw her touching the broken walls gently, as if she remembered them, or maybe compared them to her own world. She looked at him and whispered. Daniel then pointed up at the sky and whispered again, "They come." Daniel felt a chill spread through his body because her fear was real, and he could no longer think of her as a prisoner. He thought of her as someone he had to protect, even if he did not fully know why. Hours passed with heavy silence, until a strange hum rolled through the ground like thunder, but softer. Daniel rushed to the doorway and looked at the horizon. Faint lights blinked above the clouds, moving slowly and then vanishing again. Lyra stood beside him, her small frame shaking. She whispered, "Hide, hide, hide." Daniel understood. They were scanning, searching for her, and maybe they could sense her energy or track her in ways he could not imagine. Turned quickly and gathered supplies, food, water, an old rifle, and signaled her to follow. He led her deeper into the underground storage of the colony, a place no one had entered for years. The air was thick with dust, but it was safe for now. He closed the heavy doors behind them, and the darkness swallowed them whole, only his lamp giving a weak circle of lighting the silence. Lyra sat down, her hands trembling. She looked at him with wet eyes and whispered again, her broken English, "You protect me." Daniel did not answer at first because the weight of her words was heavy, but finally he nodded yes, and for the first time she smiled, a small fragile smile that seemed to give him strength. Suddenly the radio he carried hissed, louder voices speaking in sharp tones, repeating coordinates and commands, and he knew the hunters were close. They had landed nearby, and soon they would search every building, every shadow, every life sign. Daniel gripped the rifle tighter, but he knew his old weapon would not stand against alien soldiers. Still his mind raced. Humans had always survived by cleverness and determination, and maybe that would be enough. Lyra reached out her hand and touched his arm, her eyes pleading. She whispered again, no fight, they kill." But Daniel shook his head slowly. He said, "I cannot give you to them." And though she may not have understood every word, she felt the meaning. Her tears fell quietly onto the dusty floor. The sound above them grew louder, boots or machines. Daniel could not tell. The hunters were inside the colony now, and every second brought them closer. Daniel turned off the lamp and held his breath, the darkness deep, but his heart louder than thunder. Lyra leaned against him, her body shaking with fear and trust at the same time, and Daniel realized this was no longer about survival or trade. It was about something deeper, something human. Minutes stretched like hours until finally heavy steps echoed just outside the storage chamber. Daniel aimed the rifle, though he knew it was useless. The door rattled once, then silence. Then another signal on his radio said, "Clear, moving to next point," and slowly the steps faded away. Daniel exhaled, shaking. He looked at Lyra, who still held his arm tightly. She whispered thank you, her voice weak but filled with meaning. Daniel nodded, but deep inside he knew this was only the beginning. The hunters were not giving up, and soon they would return stronger and closer as the storm outside grew fiercer, and the colony groaned under the weight of the wind. Daniel sat in the dark holding the rifle and thinking of choices that could decide both their lives and perhaps something greater for all of humanity. And beside him the alien girl with glowing eyes closed them, slowly resting as if trusting him completely. And in that moment, Daniel felt a fire inside, a promise that he would not let her be taken no matter the cost. The silence after the hunters left was heavy, like iron pressing on the chest. And Daniel did not move for a long time. He only listened to the sound of Lyra breathing beside him, her small frame shaking. Even though the danger had passed for now, he felt her fear, and it mixed with his own, because he knew the hunters would return again, and next time, they might not miss the hidden storage where they now sat. When Lyra opened her glowing eyes, she looked at him with a strange sadness, and then she spoke slowly, using the few words she had learned. No, safe, they come again, stronger soon. Daniel leaned closer, trying to understand. He asked, why do they want you? But her voice broke, and she lowered her head, whispering only one word, secret. Then she placed her hand on her chest, and Daniel realized she was carrying something inside her, something they wanted. Desperately, Daniel thought about this long into the night. He knew he could leave her outside when the hunters returned, and maybe they would ignore him. Maybe they would not harm a single human alone in the ruins. But something inside him refused to betray her. He felt that keeping her safe was not only about her life, it was about something bigger, something that could mean survival for humanity itself. The next morning the storm cleared, and the sky was pale with distant stars. Daniel climbed up to the surface to scout the area. His eyes caught strange shapes burned into the ground from the hunter ships that had landed nearby. He crouched low, moving slowly across the colony, ruins, his rifle tight in his hand, but his real weapon was his mind and his stubborn will. He had no army, no shield, only the human strength that never surrendered. When he returned underground, Lyra stood waiting, her hands clasped tightly, as if praying. She looked at him and whispered, Daniel, why help? Why not give me? And Daniel felt her question cut deep. He did not have a simple answer. He only said, because you trust me, and because I am human. She did not fully understand, but tears gathered in her eyes, and she nodded slowly as if that was enough. Hours later the radio crackled again, voices sharp and filled with command. The hunters were planning a full sweep of the colony. Daniel listened carefully, writing small notes. He could understand the rhythm of their search. He knew they would soon discover the storage. If he did not act, his thoughts raced. He had to make a plan to outsmart them, because fighting was death, but thinking was survival. He packed quickly, water, food, a small battery pack, and told Lyra, follow me. She obeyed without hesitation. They moved through narrow tunnels under the colony. The dark passage filled with dust and rust, the air heavy. But it gave them a chance to escape. Daniel guided her toward the old mining shafts deep under the rock, where scanners would struggle to find them. The path was dangerous, filled with broken ladders and sharp steel, but Lyra followed every step, her glowing eyes the only light at times, and Daniel felt strangely comforted by that glow, even though it reminded him that she was the reason they were hunted. When they reached a deeper chamber, Daniel stopped breathing hard. He listened carefully. Above them, faint echoes of engines rumbling. The hunters were landing more troops. He could almost feel the ground shaking. Lyra touched his shoulder, her face pale. She whispered, no hope, too many, they catch us. Daniel looked at her and shook his head, his voice low but firm. No, they will not take you. For a long time they sat in silence until finally Lyra spoke again, her words broken but heavy. They want me because I know weakness. Her eyes filled with pain. Daniel stared at her. Weakness? What weakness? She struggled with words, then finally whispered, only humans can use it. And Daniel felt his heart pound faster. This was more than just survival she carried. Knowledge that could turn the war, and she chose to trust him with it. The chamber shook as Dust fell from the ceiling. The hunters had entered the tunnels now. Daniel held his rifle but knew bullets would not stop what was coming. He looked at Lyra and made his choice. He said, "You must stay behind me. I will lead them away." She shook her head, tears falling. She whispered, "No, you die." Daniel smiled faintly. Even in the dark, he said, "Better me than you." But she grabbed his arm fiercely, her small strength surprising him, and she whispered, "No, together, always together." The steps grew louder. Shadows moved at the edge of the tunnel. Daniel pulled Lyra behind broken rocks, aiming his rifle, his heart pounding, his breath sharp. The hunters came closer, tall, dark figures with glowing armor, scanning the walls with cruel precision. Daniel waited, his finger tight on the trigger, ready to fire even if it meant his last stand. Then Lyra pressed her hands together, and her eyes glowed brighter than ever before. The hunters froze, sensing the strange energy. One of them shouted in their harsh tongue, but before they could advance, Lyra whispered words Daniel did not understand, and a wave of light pulsed from her body. The scanners flickered, the armor lights dimmed. The hunters stumbled, confused. Daniel stared in shock. He realized she had power, hidden power, and maybe this was the secret weakness she carried. She collapsed after the light faded, her body weak. Daniel caught her before she fell. He whispered, "What did you do?" But she could only whisper, "Save you," and then she closed her eyes, breathing faint and fragile. Daniel held her tightly, his own fear rising, but his determination burning stronger. He understood now that protecting her was not only duty, it was destiny. As more footsteps echoed deeper in the tunnels, Daniel lifted her into his arms, his rifle still ready. He whispered to her, though she could not hear, "We will survive. Lyra, we will make them see what humans are." And he began moving through the shadows, hunted, but unbroken. The tunnels shook with heavy noise as the hunters marched deeper, their strange weapons glowing in the dark, and Daniel carried Lyra in his arms, her body weak. After she released that strange wave of light, he did not know how long she could survive like this, but he knew if he stopped, even for one moment, they would both be caught. His breath was heavy as he ran through the broken shafts, his boots striking the metal floor with echoes that seemed too loud, and he feared the hunters would hear, but he had no choice. He had to move fast. He had to stay ahead. He placed Lyra down gently for a moment to catch his breath. She opened her glowing eyes weakly and whispered, "Daniel, no fight, run far away." But he shook his head, his voice low but firm, "I will not leave you. I cannot." And she closed her eyes again, tears falling down her cheeks, because she knew he was ready to die for her. Sound of machines filled the tunnel behind them. Daniel looked back and saw faint red lights cutting through the dust. They were scanning every corner, moving closer and closer. His heart pounded like fire in his chest. He lifted Lyra again and pushed forward deeper into the mine. The path narrow, the air thick and hard to breathe, but he kept going because stopping meant death. Finally he reached an old control chamber filled with rusted consoles and broken screens. He placed Lyra against the wall and looked around, searching for anything that could help him defend her. He found wires, broken power cells, and pieces of machinery. He thought quickly, using his human mind that always looked for survival. He connected wires together, and sparks flew. It was dangerous, but he smiled faintly. Maybe this old place could still fight for him. Lyra whispered weakly, "Daniel, why help me? Humans not strong." Her words broken but sharp. He turned to her, his eyes burning with fire, and he said, "Humans are strong because we never stop, because we always stand again, even when we fall." And she stared at him as if seeing him for the first time, her glowing eyes wide with emotion. The footsteps were closer. Now the hunters were almost at the chamber. Daniel pulled his rifle and crouched behind the broken consoles. He whispered to himself, "Stay calm, stay alive, protect her." He aimed at the doorway, his finger tight on the trigger, his breath slow. He felt the old anger of survival rise inside him, the anger of every human who had ever been hunted or pushed down. The door exploded inward, and light filled the chamber. Dark armored figures stormed inside, their weapons ready. Daniel fired the rifle again, and again the shots echoed through the chamber. sparks flying as bullets struck armor. One hunter fell, but the others kept coming. Daniel shouted and fired again, even as their energy blasts burned the walls. Around him, Lyra screamed as she saw him fall to his knees, blood on his arm. But he stood again, refusing to give in. He grabbed the broken power cell he had wired earlier and hurled it toward the hunters. The cell exploded with blinding light, the shockwave knocking them back. Daniel shielded Lyra with his body as fire and smoke filled the chamber. When the smoke cleared, 2 hunters lay broken on the floor, but more voices echoed in the tunnels. More were coming. Daniel was bleeding badly, his breath sharp, his strength fading, but he still stood in front of Lyra. His rifle trembling in his hand, he whispered to her, "I will not let them take you." Lyra crawled to him, her face pale, her hands shaking. She whispered, "No more fight. Please, no more." But Daniel shook his head, even with blood on his lips. He said, "I am human. I fight until the end." She touched his face with her trembling hand and whispered, "Then I give you my secret." Her eyes glowed brighter than ever before she spoke words in her alien tongue, and the ground trembled. The broken machines around them flickered with sudden energy lights awakening after years of silence. Daniel watched in shock as the consoles came alive, powered by something inside her. She whispered, "Weakness. I show you their weakness." And with one final cry, she sent a surge of energy through the old systems. The walls glowed with strange symbols. The consoles transmitted a pulse across the tunnels. The hunters froze, their armor lights flickering, their weapons shutting down one by one. They collapsed to the floor, powerless. Daniel stared, unable to believe it. She had used her secret, the very thing they hunted her for, and she had given it to him. Lyra collapsed again, her body limp, her glow fading. Daniel caught her in his arms, his tears falling as he whispered, "Why did you do this?" And she whispered, "Because you protect me, because you human strong." And then her voice faded to silence. Daniel held her close, his own body weak, his blood staining the floor, but his spirit unbroken. He knew the hunters would regroup. He knew this fight was not over, but he also knew he carried something priceless now, something that could save not only her but all of humanity. The chamber was filled with smoke and silence. Daniel leaned against the wall, holding her tightly, his rifle still in his other hand, his eyes burning with fire. He whispered to her, though she could not hear, "I will not let you die. I will not let them win." And in that moment he felt stronger than ever before. The chamber was filled with smoke and the smell of burned metal. Daniel held Lyra close in his arms, his breath heavy, his blood dripping slowly to the ground, his eyes scanning the doorway where more hunters could appear at any moment. But strangely there was silence, only the sound of machines crackling with leftover energy from the pulse she had unleashed. He touched her face gently, whispering, "Stay with me. Please do not leave me." Her glowing eyes opened weakly, and she whispered, "Daniel, strong, human strong." Her words soft but filled with meaning. He wanted to believe her, but he could feel her body cold and fragile. She had given everything to protect him, and now she was fading like a dying star. Daniel forced himself to stand, carrying her weight. Even though his own wounds burned like fire, he moved out of the chamber into the dark tunnels, his rifle ready, his mind focused. He told himself, "I cannot die now. I cannot let her sacrifice be lost." As he moved, he noticed the hunters lying still, their armor powerless, their weapons dark. The secret she had shared had destroyed their strength. He realized this was the reward. She had given him the greatest weapon, not a machine, not a gun, but knowledge that only humans could use against her people. When he reached the surface, the storm had cleared, the sky filled with sharp stars above the broken colony. The silence stretched across the land, but Daniel knew it would not last. Soon more hunters would come, and he had to be ready. He placed Lyra gently on the cold ground and held her hand tightly. He whispered, "You saved me. You saved us." She looked at him weakly, her eyes glowing faint, her lips trembling. She whispered, "Humans, different humans, never stop." Her voice almost gone. Daniel leaned close and whispered, "We never stop because we fight for each other." Her eyes closed slowly, and for one terrible moment, Daniel thought she was gone. But then she whispered one last word, gift, and her body glowed faintly, the energy moving from her to a small device in her hand. She pressed it into his palm and said with her last strength, "This is yours, only you can use it." Then she collapsed. Silent and still, Daniel held the device tightly, his tears falling, his chest heavy. He looked at her still face and whispered, "I will not waste this. I will make them see what humans are." He stood again, his body broken, but his spirit burning brighter. Then ever voices echoed in the distance, engines rumbling, the sky flickered with alien lights, new hunter ships descending. Daniel wiped the blood from his face and raised the device Lyra had given him. It glowed in his hand with strange symbols he did not understand, but somehow he felt it connect with his mind. It pulsed with his heartbeat, as if it belonged to him. Hunter ships landed around the colony, their soldiers marching out, weapons raised. Their leader stepped forward, tall and armored. With eyes cold like fire, he shouted in his strange tongue, pointing at Daniel, demanding surrender. But Daniel stood tall, his body shaking, but his eyes unbroken. He raised the device and it glowed brighter. The hunters froze, their armor flickering. Again their weapons dying in their hands. Leader shouted in rage and charged forward, but Daniel pressed the device against the ground, and a wave of light exploded outward. The hunters fell one by one, powerless like shadows in the wind. The ships above trembled, their engines failing, and one by one they fell silent, crashing to the ground, the sky clearing as the human stood alone among ruins. When the silence returned, Daniel looked down at Lyra, still lying on the ground. He knelt beside her, whispering, "It is over, they are gone, we are safe." But she did not open her eyes. He held her close, tears falling, whispering again and again, "You gave me everything, you gave me strength and hope." For a long time he sat there with her, in his arms, the stars watching above, the dust settling around the broken colony. Finally he felt her hand move slightly, her eyes opened, faintly glowing. Once more she whispered, weak but alive, "Daniel, you protect me, you save me too." And he laughed through his tears, whispering, "No, you saved me, Lyra, you saved humanity." She smiled weakly and whispered, "Then together we save world." And Daniel nodded, pressing his forehead to hers, whispering, "Yes, together, always together." As dawn rose slowly over the dead colony, Daniel stood with her beside him, the device glowing in his hand. The hunters defeated the secret. Now in human hands, he realized. This was more than survival, more than escape. This was the beginning of a new future, a future where humans would no longer be hunted or ignored, a future where their strength would be known. Alien Girl had given him the shocking reward. Not gold, not power, but trust, faith, and knowledge, and that was more valuable than anything else in the universe. And Daniel promised in his heart that he would carry this gift to the rest of his people, no matter the cost. Wind moved softly across the ruins, the sky brighter with the light of a new day, and Daniel and Lyra walked together away from the broken colony. Their hands joined, their steps steady and strong. They were no longer just human and alien. They were something more. They were hope, and they would face whatever came next together. The end.